What is up guys, welcome to Unten Inc. A lot of people comment to make videos about the planets in the solar system. So what happened? I have to say that we'll get to it one by one because some suggestions have to get made first because they're older. The solar system used to have 9 planets and one of them got fired, which we made a video on. We also made a video about Earth's sister, meaning Venus. We also made plenty of videos about planet Earth and Mars. We made a video about Jupiter, and we still have the rest of them left. But now, we want to start in the beginning of the solar system, the first planet next to the Sun, Mercury. We apologize for not doing them in order. Right now, if we say Mercury, the next video is gonna be on Saturn. So in the middle, we have to skip Venus, Earth, Mars, and Jupiter till we get to Saturn. So after Mercury, we'll make a video on Saturn. But you should know that planet Mercury and Saturn are 1.3 billion kilometers apart. So please don't comment where is Saturn's video, it's a long way there. But this was a joke, we'll get to it as soon as possible. But let's go to Mercury, the closest planet to our Sun. First thing you need to know is, Mercury was discovered a very long time ago. They believe the Assyrians around 1400 BC, meaning around 3400 years ago, they discovered Mercury. They didn't know that it was a planet, but they saw this dim light around our Sun. But this little planet is being discovered more and more each day, especially now with the technology we have. In the beginning of the video, we said Mercury is the smallest planet in the solar system. The diameter of this planet is the size of the United States, meaning 4,880 kilometers. And you should also know that the Earth's diameter is 12,742 kilometers. Mercury, just like Earth, has 3 main layers: the core, mantle, and the crust. Even though just like Earth, Mercury has 3 main layers, but it doesn't have any tectonic plates. So like Earth, it's not in pieces that moves and causes earthquakes. But Mercury's layers are really different from Earth's. Earth's core is 55% of the planet, but Mercury's core is 85% of the planet, an extremely ginormous core. And it has a really thin mantle and crust. Scientists believe that this big core in the 4.5 billion years that this planet is around is causing the planet to shrink little by little. So it gets colder and colder and shrinks. And they believe since the beginning it has shrunk by 7 kilometers, meaning the diameter from each side has decreased by 7 kilometers. This planet lives next to a ball of fire. Even though it's about 58 million kilometers away, but it sees the Sun as a giant hellhole next to it. Being this close to the Sun has caused its atmosphere to be extremely different, and that is why they don't call it the atmosphere, they just call it an exosphere. The Earth has an exosphere as well. It's the outermost layer of the atmosphere, but Mercury has a pretty much useless atmosphere, or should I say exosphere. Mercury's exosphere is made up of oxygen, sodium, hydrogen, helium, and potassium. All the gases that create this exosphere come off of the surface of this planet. Mercury itself rotates very slowly. For it to turn around one time around itself, it takes 59 days. And Earth does this in 24 hours. But Mercury revolves around the Sun extremely fast. And in 88 days, it orbits the Sun. So 88 days is 1 year on Mercury. Being this close to the Sun and not having an atmosphere has caused the temperature on this planet to be extreme. Each side that's facing the Sun, it could be as hot as 427 degrees Celsius. But if you go on the dark side, it could be as cold as negative 179 degrees Celsius. And this shows that Mercury's atmosphere doesn't hold any heat inside. And like Earth, it can keep the nighttime warm. If you were on Mercury, during the day, you would fire up and get barbecued, and on the dark side, you will turn into an icicle and die. So you could say there's no living thing on this planet. This little planet next to this giant fireball doesn't do anything itself. The Sun basically controls it. The most affected planet by the Sun's gravity is Mercury, and that is why Mercury's orbit is like an oval. And when the oval gets closer to the Sun, the speed gets higher, exactly like what you're seeing. When it's farther, it's slower, and the closer it gets, the faster and faster it gets. The Sun makes this thing revolve around it so fast that it has a speed of 161,000 kilometers an hour. And that is why Mercury can revolve around the Sun in just 88 days. But our own planet, meaning the Earth, is not slow either. Earth, with a speed of 107,000 kilometers an hour, revolves around the Sun. But the orbit is much larger than Mercury's. And that is why it takes 365 days for it to go around once. This tiny black dot you see is Mercury in front of the Sun. Looking at this planet and studying it has been a problem since the beginning because it's extremely small and it's next to the biggest light source around us. Until now, NASA has sent 2 probes there, Mariner 10 and the Messenger. Most of the information we have of Mercury were thanks to these 2. Mariner 10 was launched into space in 1973. The plan was to visit Venus first, then go towards Mercury. This probe worked for 1 year and 4 months, then they had to turn it off. Right now, it's a space junk and it revolves around the Sun. And the Messenger was launched in 2004, and after 7 years, meaning in 2011, it gets to Mercury. For 4 years, it works and studies Mercury, and NASA makes it crash into the surface of the planet. They probably were finished with it and they didn't want it to leave it like a space junk, so they made it crash into the planet. This video was about Mercury. What do you guys think? If we go from Earth towards the Sun, there's 2 planets along the way. The first planet is Venus, and the second one is Mercury. A lot of people asked us to make videos about different types of planets, like Neptune, Uranus, and Saturn. We will get to those, but first, we're gonna look at Venus. They also call Venus Earth's twin. But they're not twins at all. They just say that because they're similar in size. Venus is farther from the Sun than Mercury, but it's extremely hotter. And it is the hottest planet in the entire solar system. The surface temperature of this planet is around 460 degrees Celsius. The cool part about this planet is that the entire planet has the same temperature. Even when it's nighttime and the sun is not pointing at it, it still holds that 460 degrees Celsius. And the reason for that is it has a really thick atmosphere and it's formed with mainly carbon dioxide. But there's one question: why is Venus, even though it's not the closest planet to the sun, hotter than Mercury? The reason is that Mercury has a very thin atmosphere and it doesn't hold the heat inside the planet. But Venus is not like that. The air pressure on Venus is so bad that we can't even handle it. It would feel like you going 1 kilometer underneath the water. NASA says if you enter this planet, before you die from the heat, you will be crushed by the air pressure. As we said earlier, Mercury's atmosphere is so thin, it doesn't hold any heat. So as soon as it goes behind the sun, all the heat dissipates and it turns into a very cold side. But Venus doesn't release any heat. It keeps it all inside because of that thick atmosphere. You guys most likely know what the Goldilocks zone is. It's a habitable zone for a planet, and it relates on where it sits compared to its star. Venus is nowhere near the Goldilocks zone, but scientists believe long time ago this planet wasn't a hellhole. They say the surface of this planet is rocky and it has a lot of volcanoes. There's a lot of plains and mountains everywhere. On the surface, it has 460 degrees Celsius. And if you go on top of the mountain, it's still 460 degrees Celsius. The tallest mountain on Venus is Maxwell Montes, and they say it's around 11 kilometers high, meaning it's somewhere around 2,200 meters taller than Mount Everest. Just like we said, scientists believe that this planet wasn't a hellhole before. Venus is the same age as Earth, meaning around 4.5 billion years old. This is not a short time. We can't even imagine what 1,000 years ago was like. So just think about 4.5 billion years ago. They believe that the first 3 billion years, there was water on this planet, and the temperatures were between 20 to 50 degrees Celsius. It was hotter than planet Earth, but it was stable. But around 700 million years ago, the planet began to get hotter and hotter, and it made all the water evaporate. When they look at the history of this planet, they say it went through phases that it got hot and cold throughout the years. There's times where it was really cold and times where it's extremely hot. Around 3 billion years ago, they believe it was at its most stable time. The weather was good, there was liquid water, and it had tectonic plates just like planet Earth. Scientists want to find out how this thick atmosphere was formed around this planet. The more they researched, the less they found out. But the theory says that there's a lot of volcanoes on this planet caused all this carbon dioxide to build up in the atmosphere. And they believe it was all the volcanoes that did this. They produced so much CO2 that they made this planet a hellhole. They say if Venus wants to get back to normal, hundreds of millions of years has to pass for all that CO2 gas to slowly go back into the rocks. They also believe that on this planet, there could have been life, because way before planet Earth, there was liquid water on this planet. But researching all this is a pain. First of all, we can't even properly see the surface of Venus, and that's because of the thick atmosphere. And second of all the water has evaporated, and the surface is like a hellhole. And even if we could have gone on the surface, we would have died by the air pressure before the heat. So right now, we can't properly research this. It's a hellhole, right? But this hellhole has a really nice view for us. Some nights, if you're in the right spot, you can easily see Venus. Venus is the brightest light in the night sky after the moon, and it's very beautiful. It's good to know that that smaller one on the top left is Jupiter. Can you believe it? A planet that far shines bright like a star. But Jupiter is a giant itself, so it makes sense that we can see it so clearly. But the beauty of Venus is something else. If you haven't already heard, Perseverance Mars rover landed on Mars 4 days ago on February 18th. This Mars rover is the newest and most advanced rover NASA has sent to Mars. First, you have to know that the first Mars rover was Sojourner, which got there in 1997. This Mars rover only weighed 10 kilograms, and it could only pass 20 centimeter obstacles. And this was a huge problem because there's a lot of bumps and rocks and stuff on Mars. For 1997, this is the most advanced rover NASA could come up with. Before Sojourner, there was a lot of concepts on what a rover should look like, and for that, there was a lot of other designs. This is what the Soviets designed. They put like ski-looking wheels because they thought it's like a snow or like a soft sand. But after some research, they found out skis are stupid and it should just have wheels. This advanced technology for 1997 came with a solar panel. And because Mars is really cold, they had to put heaters for the solar panels so it doesn't freeze. You guys should know, the weather on Mars, it could go as high as 20 centigrade, like on a summer day, or a -70 on a winter night. Sojourner couldn't contact Earth itself. It collected all of the data and gave it to the base that it landed with. And the base that it landed with would send a signal to Earth. This advanced machine for 1997 couldn't go a radius of more than 500 meters. Let's move on, but even though it wasn't that advanced, it gave us the first picture of Mars. And this is that photo, the first picture that you can see what the surface of Mars looks like. Even though this was the most advanced technology in 1997, looking at it now, it's not advanced at all. It couldn't go more than 100 meters in its life, and after 85 days, it stopped working. But it did a couple good things. First, it gave us this picture, and it showed the scientists what the surface of Mars looks like, and it helped NASA build the next Mars rover. Sojourner, before its death, helped us out another way, and it showed us that on Mars, there used to be water, and this was really important for scientists. Even though it only lasted 85 days, But the NASA scientists were extremely proud of Sojourner. Let's fast forward 6 years later to 2003. NASA was designing some new rovers for Mars, and these two were it: Spirit and Opportunity. These two, with 1 month apart, were sent to space. And in 2004, they successfully landed on Mars. Even though these two Mars rovers had a 6-year difference with Sojourner, but their technology was light years ahead. First, the weight was a lot heavier, so it went from Sojourner, which weighed 10 kilograms, to Opportunity, which weighed 185 kilograms. And NASA only used the most advanced tools, so for 2003 equipment, it was the best of the best. These rovers would go and explore rocks and take samples and test what it's made out of. And it even had a magnetic arm to see if there's any magnetic particles on Mars. These two Mars rovers, just like Sojourner, had solar panels, but it was way bigger and more powerful. You might think that some people are controlling these rovers like they control a remote control car. But you have to know that that's not how it works. These rovers are pre-programmed on what to do that day. Like in the morning, the NASA workers give the rovers a schedule. Like for example, they tell the rover go 20 meters north, take a sample and examine it. And the rover spends the day doing that. And you have to know that controlling a rover from Earth is kind of impossible, because each message from Earth to Mars could take up to 20 minutes. And it also takes 20 minutes from Mars to get back to Earth. So that 40-minute delay doesn't let you control the rover properly. So the programming is a way better option. A bad part about these Mars rovers was that they could only work during daylight, because the only time they would start working is when there was sunlight, and when the sun was gone, it would stop working. When these rovers wanted to send signal to Earth, first they would send it to the satellite around Mars, and then the satellite would send a signal back to Earth, and vice versa. When they were building and designing these rovers, they estimated that these rovers would work for 90 days and give us plenty of information about Mars. And after 90 days, they most likely will die and not work. But these rovers lasted way longer than 90 days, and they worked for 15 years. And at the end, in 2019, they stopped somewhere on Mars and died. And since they only planned 90 days for these rovers, NASA had already sent another rover, and that was Curiosity, which landed on Mars on 2012, so 7 years before Opportunity and Spirit died. Curiosity, next to the predecessors, is like a giant. It weighs 899 kilograms. For landing this thing on Mars, they had to use the most advanced landing system they've ever used. And because it weighed so much, they had to use a giant parachute. And at the end, a jetpack had to lower it slowly onto the surface. The jetpack would slowly lower to the surface, and using cables, it would drop the rover extremely carefully onto the surface. The biggest advantage Curiosity had over the other two rovers was that it didn't have solar panels, and the energy came from a generator. And what is the fuel to this generator? Plutonium-238. Plutonium is an atomic fuel, which you could pretty much say that it's not gonna run out anytime soon. They also use Plutonium-238 in atom bombs. And this form of fuel helped Curiosity so it could work day and night. This rover is pretty much like a laboratory on wheels. It could do all kinds of tests. Like Opportunity and Spirit would go examine a rock and see what it's made out of. But Curiosity could literally drill a piece of rock, take the powder and put it inside of a laboratory and test what it's made out of. After 9 years, Curiosity is still active on the surface of Mars. Curiosity is planned to work for 14 years, but the scientists say it might last longer than 14. The only big issue this rover has are the wheels, which are falling apart. And the reason for that is there's a lot of sharp rocks on Mars, and Curiosity weighs a lot. And since NASA didn't want Curiosity to stay alone, Perseverance landed on Mars 4 days ago. This weighs a little bit more than Curiosity, and it's 1,025 kilograms. The technology of Perseverance is pretty much similar to Curiosity, but they fixed the main issues like the wheels and added more tools to it. But the point of sending this rover to Mars is that they want to see if there was life on Mars, and they want to see if there was ever life on Mars. And Perseverance also has another mission, and that is to test the atmosphere and the oxygen levels, because it wants to help humans be ready when they land on Mars. The most awesome part of this rover is its landing, because the NASA scientists had to wait 20 minutes to see if it was successful or not. Perseverance landed like this 4 days ago. Since Curiosity's landing was so successful, they also used it on this. Perseverance has landed on this part of Mars, and they believe that it used to be a lake, and they also believe there was a river, and Perseverance's main mission is that to study the surface and see if there was life. There's a lot of different planets in the world, and each one of them have a different story. But there's one planet in particular that's in our own solar system. Jupiter. This planet was the first planet that formed in the beginning of the solar system, and it has an age of 5 billion years. Which you should also know that Earth is 4.5 billion years old. So Jupiter was 500 million years old when Earth was just beginning to form. The name Jupiter comes from Roman mythology, and he was a king of gods, and they gave this name to the planet because it's the biggest planet. If you guys don't already know, the planets go in this order from the Sun: Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, and after Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune are after. So Jupiter is after Mars, so it should be really close to us. But the distance is 588 million kilometers. And that's at its nearest distance. But when it's at its farthest, it's 968 million kilometers away. Let's take a closer look to this monstrosity of a planet. If you look at the diameter of Jupiter, you could fit 11 Earths in there. But if you want to count the volume, you could fit 1,300 Earths inside Jupiter. And the mass is 318 times of Earth's mass. 318 is a crazy number, and if you put the mass of every single planet in the solar system together minus Jupiter, it's 129 times Earth's mass. So in this case, we are slowly realizing how huge this planet is. The first 4 planets of the solar system, and that includes our planet, they're all made of rock and have a surface, meaning you could pretty much stand on it. I already know that Mercury is a really hot planet and you really can't stand there, but it is a solid surface. But Jupiter has no surface, and it's formed with a bunch of gases, 75% hydrogen, 24% helium, and 1% other. And all these gases are held together by a small core. The other gases are ammonia, methane, and oxygen. When we look at Jupiter, we're basically looking at the atmosphere. We pretty much can't see anything inside the planet. And that's because the atmosphere is 70 kilometers thick. And if you look at this atmosphere, it's pretty much like an ocean of gas. And it's always moving. And they produce different types of colors like white, yellow, orange, and red. And the reason for the colors are the different gases. But the most famous part of Jupiter is this little spot, and it's known as the Great Red Spot. But it's not really a spot. This is a hurricane, which started 300 years ago, and it's still going. When a storm forms on Earth, it lasts about 2 weeks. But on Jupiter, this storm started 300 years ago, and it's not looking to stop either. The speed of this hurricane is 640 kilometers an hour, meaning it's 2.5 times the fastest storm on Earth. Jupiter's gravity is so strong that in time, it collected 79 moons around it. Meaning anything big that passed by, Jupiter took it in its orbit. Between these 79 moons of Jupiter, 4 of them stand out. The biggest one is Ganymede, and this moon is also the biggest moon in the entire solar system. It's also 26% bigger than Mercury. The next moon is Callisto. Callisto is pretty much the same size as Mercury, but you could say it's 1% smaller. The next moon is Io. You see these spots on the moon? These spots are all volcanoes, and Io is the most volcanically active place in the solar system. There's 400 volcanoes on this sphere, and it's always active, and it's not looking to stop either. The last big moon is Europa. Europa is a moon covered in ice, but astronomers believe that under this ice there's water, and in those waters you could find life. Europa deserves its own video because there's a lot of cool information about it. But let's move on. Let's go back to Jupiter. You could say Jupiter is like a shield. It has such a strong gravitational pull that it pulls a lot of the asteroids that comes in the solar system. And there's always a lot of meteors hitting Jupiter. And these meteors that enter Jupiter, they also have mass themselves, and they keep adding mass to this giant planet. And that's another reason that this planet is this big. And it's also the oldest, and that's pretty much why it's so big. Before Earth was formed, Jupiter had already begun turning into a giant, and it also became a giant shield for the solar system. Planets like Jupiter in the whole universe are really not common, and planets at this size with this mass are extremely rare, but it could be found. HATP 67b is another gas planet, and scientists believe that this is the largest planet we've ever found. This planet is 2 times Jupiter in size. But it's not as massive as Jupiter because the mass of this planet is half of Jupiter's. Even though it's twice in size, it's not as massive. HATP 67b was found in 2017 and it's 1,043 light years away. But again, let's go back to our own giant. Jupiter's orbit around the Sun takes about 12 years, meaning a year on Jupiter is 12 years on Earth. But you should also know that one day on Jupiter is 9 hours and 56 minutes. In this short time, Jupiter makes a full turn, and for a planet this size, this is insane. The speed that Jupiter is spinning is 43,000 kilometers an hour. This mass and the speed of spinning is making scientists want to use this energy, and you could say they've used this energy before. If you haven't heard about Voyager 1, you should know that Voyager 1's speed is achieved because of Jupiter, and it used Jupiter like a slingshot and caught all the speed. Since the day we talked about the planet Mercury, it has been 11 days, and now we have gotten to Saturn. We had good speed. Do you know how long the drive is from Mercury to Saturn? 1,366,000,000 kilometers. But we went at the speed of the internet. But let's go and talk about the planet Saturn. Saturn is known as the most beautiful planet in the solar system. A lot of people say no, the Earth is the most beautiful. But Saturn is unique in its own way, and it's because of the rings, and that is why it's considered the most beautiful. But all this beauty is from afar. If you get close, there's nothing beauty about it. But when you get close to Earth, it feels like heaven. If Saturn didn't have this ring, it would be considered an ugly old planet. But let's go to the main focus. Saturn is the second largest planet in the solar system, right behind Jupiter, the biggest planet. You could fit 10 planet Earths in the diameter of Saturn. Scientists say this huge planet is the lightest planet in the solar system. If you didn't know, Saturn is made up of gas, and it's a gas planet. And 2 of the most common gases that make up this planet is hydrogen and helium. Scientists believe that this planet is so light that it would float on water if it could, because the molecules cannot sink in water. No planets other than Saturn can do this, even the baby planet Mercury. So only Saturn can do this. You have to know that this planet, just like any planet that's made up of gas, doesn't have a surface, and you can't stand on it because there's a core that's made up of ice, rock, and water, and it has a strong gravity pull, and it has collected all this gas around it and has formed this giant planet. You can kind of suggest in theory that if planet Earth starts collecting all the gases and thickening up its atmosphere, it would get bigger and bigger and maybe turn into a gas giant. But around us, there's not that much gas to be collected, so this is not gonna happen ever. The North Pole of this planet is a hellhole. There is a giant hexagon in the North Pole at the size of 2 planet Earths. In this hexagon, there's kind of a permanent storm. Unfortunately, there's no living thing on Saturn because nothing is gonna survive on this planet and this storm. There is no way to stand on this planet, live on this planet, and right now with today's technology, there's no way to go inside the planet and study it. So we're not gonna think about going there, but we're gonna talk about its moons. Saturn has more than 50 confirmed moons, and the more they study it, the more it adds to the moon. Because there's a lot of objects that orbit this planet, but they're not sure if it's moons or not. One of Saturn's smallest moons is Enceladus, and it's formed with ice. It has a diameter of only 500 kilometers. It's a baby moon, you could say. But the biggest moon is Titan, which has a diameter of 5,150 kilometers, or the size of Canada. Titan is the only moon in the solar system that has a proper atmosphere and clouds. Scientists believe under the ice of Titan in Enceladus, there's oceans, and inside those oceans, there could be life. All these moons help planet Saturn to have these beautiful rings around it. Saturn's ring is the most complicated ring in the solar system. There's a lot of stuff in this ring, but it mostly consists of ice and rock, and the sizes start from a piece of dust all the way to the size of a mountain. All these stuff are orbiting around Saturn in the shape of this ring you see. If you look at the ring from its sides, you could fit 4.5 planet Earths. But the funny thing is, the thickness of this ring is only 1 kilometer, and that is why you see the ring very narrow. So why is this ring so thin and stretched out? And the reason is because of the small moons around it, and the gravity from those moons stretches this ring out. And the gravity causes it to stretch out, get thinner, but bigger. The cool thing is that humans have known this planet for thousands of years. They first thought it was a star, but after the 18th centuries, when telescopes were invented, they noticed that Saturn is a planet. When telescopes were invented and Saturn was discovered, it was really interesting for the astronomers back then. And the ring alone was another world for them. And all the moons it had. So astronomers had a lot of work to do to figure out what's going on with this planet. 1 year on Saturn takes 29 Earth years. It's really far from the sun, so it makes sense that it takes this long to orbit once. You remember that Mercury is the closest planet to the sun, and it orbits the sun in 88 days, and it's because it's the closest planet to the sun. But Saturn is extremely far from the sun. But one day on Saturn takes only 10 hours and 42 minutes long, meaning in this short time, it orbits around itself once. The speed of this orbit caused that hexagonal storm you see on the North Pole, and that hexagon wants to spin faster than the planet itself. In 1997, NASA sent Cassini towards Saturn to study it and see what is going on, and also study the moons that orbit this giant planet. Most of the things we just explained in this video is thanks to Cassini. It took 7 years for Cassini to get to the orbit of Saturn. It finally got there in 2004 and started to do its job. This probe worked for 13 years straight, meaning until the year 2017, and it helped scientists out a lot about this gas giant. NASA decided at the end of Cassini's life to crash it into the gas surface, so it gets destroyed. But before it got to this main gas, it burnt up. What is up, guys? We've made a video about most of the planets in the solar system. Only the last two planets are left, Uranus and Neptune. Today, we're gonna talk about these two. The first planet we get to is Uranus, because it's closer to us. Until the end of the 18th century, Uranus wasn't discovered yet, but after a while, in 1781, they finally found it. Uranus is the 7th planet from the Sun. The distance between Uranus and the Sun is 20 times the distance between the Earth from the Sun. As you guys know, the distance between Earth and the Sun is around 150 million kilometers, and 20 times that means 3 billion kilometers. This faraway planet from its star, it takes it 84 years to do one rotation around the Sun, meaning 1 year on this planet is 84 Earth years. If you could somehow live on Uranus, every 21 years, a season on Uranus would go by. When 4 seasons on Uranus pass, a human lifetime is coming to an end as well, because it takes it 84 years to do one rotation. Even though Uranus is not the farthest planet from the Sun, but it's still the coldest planet in the solar system. The temperature on this planet could go as low as -223 degrees Celsius. And the reason for this coldness is the gas that it has. Because if you didn't know, Uranus is a gas planet. The atmosphere of this planet, meaning the spot we can see, is made up of hydrogen, helium, and methane. When you pass the top layer, you get to a thick layer of ice. Ices that are made up of water, ammonia, and methane, and in the end, you get to a rocky core. Uranus is about 4 Earths wide. One of the reasons that Uranus is one of the coldest planets is that outside of the planet is obviously cold, and that thick layer of ice underneath makes it even colder. All the planets in the solar system rotate horizontally, but Uranus is the only planet that rotates vertically. The equator of this planet is also vertical. And most of the time, one of its poles is facing the Sun. Scientists believe the reason that this planet is tilted is because it experienced a crash. A crash that was probably caused by a planet or an asteroid, and it hit Uranus so hard that it tilted it to the side, and the ring that was formed around it was probably because of the debris from the crash. Not only did the debris create about 13 rings around the planet, but 27 moons came out of it as well. And the moons, just like the planet, rotate vertically, kind of like a giant Ferris wheel. A Ferris wheel in space. When Western people would discover these planets, they would put a Roman or Greek name on it. Uranus in Greek means the god of the heaven. This planet is everything but heaven. Every night and day on Uranus is 17 hours and 14 minutes long, meaning in that time, it rotates around itself once. But we said the rotation around the sun takes about 84 years. But let's go in the spaceship, turn it on, which is the last planet in the solar system. After that, there is no other planet. There is one that has been fired, which we made a video on. Let's go. The distance between Uranus and Neptune is 1,650,000,000 kilometers. But our speed is really fast, even faster than the speed of light. If you don't believe me, watch this. This is Neptune, a faraway blue planet. This planet is so far away from the sun that 1 year on this planet takes 165 Earth years. Each season on this planet takes 41.5 years. The distance between the sun and Neptune causes it to be really cold, but not the coldest planet. Like we said, Uranus is closer than Neptune, but it's still the coldest planet in the solar system. But Neptune is not far off as well. Neptune's core is about 1.5 times the Earth, meaning if you delete all the gas around this planet, you get a rocky planet that's about 1.5 times Earth. 45% of the mass in this planet is this rocky core. Just like Uranus, the next layer is made up of different types of ice. Ice water, ice ammonia, and ice methane. And the thick layer of gas outside is made up of different gases like hydrogen, helium, and methane. The blue color you see on this planet is caused by the methane gas in the atmosphere. This planet is basically like a beautiful snake. The nice blue color is inviting, and you think it's a happy place. But on this planet, there are storms that you can't even wrap your head around. Think about it, when there's a storm on planet Earth, it doesn't get faster than 300 kilometers an hour. And that basically destroys whatever it's in its way. And this storm doesn't happen everywhere on Earth. These storms and thunderstorms mainly happen around Oklahoma State in the US. But in Neptune, the storms are always active. And the speed is not only 300 kilometers an hour, but it's around 2,000 kilometers an hour. Scientists say the speed of the storm on this planet is so fast that it breaks the sound barrier, and that is why it goes faster than the noise itself. Meaning, if somehow you could stand on Neptune, the storms would come to you without any sound and destroy you, because the noise is far away behind the storm itself. A storm and wind that doesn't have sound basically. Neptune has 6 rings as well, but you can't really see it because it's thin. There are also 14 moons that revolve around this planet. Neptune's biggest moon is Triton. In Greek, Triton means son of a god of the sea. They might have gave Triton this name because the planet looks like a sea. Out of any planet in the solar system, we know the least things about Neptune. First of all, it's really far from us, and only one space probe has ever passed by it. Voyager 2 in 1989 did a flyby at a distance of 5,000 kilometers. In the space differences, that's extremely close, and this probe helped us figure out the things we're explaining in this video. It has been more than 30 years since a space probe passed around this planet. See, this is the solar system, and we made a video about most of these. We hope you enjoy. If you went to school before 2006, the list of the planets in the solar system went like this: Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. These were the 9 planets of the solar system, and we introduced them from the sun and out. But if you went to school after 2006, one of the planets was deleted, and they took Pluto out of the picture. But Pluto is still there, it didn't go anywhere. It's still in its orbit in the end of the solar system. So what changed that this is not a planet anymore? Pluto didn't change at all, but human knowledge went up. And they found out that Pluto can't be a planet anymore. In the last 100 years, our knowledge of the universe has grown by a lot. We can now say that the thing that's spinning at the end of the solar system is not a planet anymore. Pluto was discovered in 1930, and it hasn't even been 100 years since we found it. But before we find out why they removed it from being a planet, we first have to find out what a planet is. In the history of astronomy, the meaning planet has changed a lot. During the time of Galileo, they believed that anything that orbits the sun is a planet. Everything was going good until 1801. This is the year that Ceres was discovered. This is an asteroid, and it's in the middle of Jupiter and Mars. During that time, they found out that Ceres is extremely small, and if you compare it to our moon, it's 1/3 of the size. Next year, in 1802, another asteroid was found, and they named it Pallas. And the more we move forward, the more asteroids they discovered around the sun, and they were all orbiting the sun. But they found out there are thousands of these around the sun, and we can't call them planets anymore. Because first of all, they were really different from other planets. They were extremely small, and most importantly, most of them aren't a sphere, and that is why they called them asteroids. When asteroids got their name, there were only 7 planets discovered in the solar system, and until 1846, Neptune had not been discovered yet. Neptune is a giant, and even though it's really far, they discovered it a bit late. Time passed, 84 years went by, and then we get to 1930. This year, the 9th planet around the sun was discovered, Pluto. You might ask, why didn't they just add Pluto in the asteroids list? First of all, you have to know that they didn't know how this planet is, and that is why they accepted it as a planet. When they discovered it, they couldn't really measure the size, and that is why they just said it's probably the size of Neptune. But there's no mistake bigger than this one. First of all, you have to know that Pluto is extremely far from Earth, and it's one of the last things in the solar system. And that is why the more advanced we got and the better tools we invented, they found out that Pluto is smaller. And the more we moved forward, the smaller Pluto got. It wasn't until 2006 that they found the exact measurement of Pluto, and they found that it's extremely small, and it's considered a dwarf. If you want to put Pluto inside Earth, you could fit 459 Plutos in there. Compared to the moon, it's a little bit bigger than half of our moon. In the year 2006, the planet that they thought is the same size as Neptune, it turned into a dwarf, and it got kicked from being a planet. In the year 1978, astronomers found Pluto's moon. The name of it is Charon. Back then, they thought this is a decent planet because it has its own moon. But the thing that surprised the scientists was that, why is the moon so giant compared to the planet? And it's half the size of the planet. And this giant moon causes Pluto not only to spin on itself, but to make a ring as well. The moon is so big that it pulls the planet with it. And this is one of the main things that made Pluto not be a planet. When a planet can't handle its own moon, it's not a planet. But even with all this proof, they still didn't want to kick it from being a planet. Until in the year 2005, Eris was discovered. Eris is pretty much like Pluto, but a little bit smaller. Eris is after Pluto in the solar system, and it's also orbiting the sun. When they found this and it didn't get added to the planets, it was at that moment that Pluto couldn't stay anymore, and they were forced to name it a dwarf planet or an asteroid. After this happened, they set new rules for planets. First of all, a planet has to orbit its star. Pluto does orbit the sun. Second rule, the planet has to be a sphere, and Pluto passes this test as well. But in the third rule, Pluto fails because a planet has to have its environment free, meaning the planet and its moons have to be alone. But Pluto has a lot of trash and junk floating around it, from asteroids to that giant moon that it has. But a lot of students were against this idea, and they said this thing is a sphere and it orbits the sun. But in return, scientists say that if you want to count it like that, you have to add hundreds of planets to the solar system. First of all, our own moon, then the 79 moons of Jupiter, and worse than that, 82 moons from Saturn. All these are sphere and orbit the sun. Scientists told the students that if you want to count it like that, 8 planets of the solar system is gonna turn into hundreds of planets in the solar system. But let's get back to Pluto. We talked about it a lot. Let's get to know it a little bit more. First of all, you have to know that the distance between the Sun and Pluto is 5,900,000,000 kilometers. And this distance causes the surface temperature of this planet to be a negative 232 degrees Celsius. When scientists see this planet, they say it's made out of rock and ice. One of the most fascinating things about this planet is that 1 night in day is 6.5 Earth days, and 1 year on this planet is 248 Earth years. Meaning, for this planet to go 1 time around the sun, we will go 248 times around the sun. This dwarf was kicked from being a planet, but a lot of people disagree with this idea and say this is still a planet. But we don't know, maybe in 50 years they'll go on this planet and say we made a mistake and this is a planet. What do you guys think? Please comment.